Got it. I welcome people to unmute and ask questions as we go along or interrupt me. I'm really going to talk just a little bit about why self-employment is important, in my opinion, and then why we developed the guide, and really to show you a resource that you may want to access yourself or share with friends if you're interested in pursuing self-employment. So I am going to share my screen and we'll go from there. So the title of this part 8 is Returning to Work Self-Employment. And really what I am hoping to do with this is give you some resources to support self-employment exploration, if that's a route that you are interested in going. So why self-employment? Self-employment has some advantages for certain people over traditional work, in particular for people who may have some disabilities that come with health issues. Self-employment can offer some flexibility to address those. It can reduce some environmental barriers to traditional employment, such as inaccessible buildings or workspaces or limited accessible transportation options. These are particularly problematic things in rural communities that have older infrastructure or lack transportation in general. It addresses limited choice and opportunity. So if for instance, what an individual is interested in pursuing isn't available as a job in that rural community, that sometimes you can tap into other skill sets, and then it allows people to stay attached or close to established support networks. So if you are wanting to stay close to family and friends, that's an opportunity to still become employed, but just think more creatively about how that is going to take place and happen or unfold. So self-employment rates in vocational rehabilitation are very low compared to what you would expect for the national average and people with disabilities in general. So across the population, people with disabilities are employed 10.1% of the people who have employment are employed in self-employment if they have a disability. People without disabilities, that rate is closer to 6.1%. And in VR, which serves an entire population of people with disabilities, that rate is below 2%. So in our estimation, and kind of the driving force behind some of the work that we've done, is that VR really is underutilizing self-employment as an option for consumers who are coming through to receive services, that it's a viable employment opportunity that should be explored and considered. So we have done research about why that might be the case, and there's a variety of reasons. One is that counselors feel like they don't have enough training to support self-employment cases. They don't really know enough about business startup to feel compelled to assist people to explore that. VR agency policies and procedures can be confusing about what's supported, what's not supported. It can take a longer time to get a business up and running than just placing someone in a job. That can be true, but there are business models out there that are actually pretty easy to start if it's kind of a more simple business plan, like starting a hair salon booth or something like that. VR participants will earn less money than in a paid job setting. That actually comes out to not be the case. Voc Rehab data indicates that people who have self-employment closures actually work fewer hours but earn higher wages for comparable benefits across jobs. There aren't adequate supports for self-employment, and that really isn't true. There are supports. Small business development centers are one example of those. And then concerns about self-employment and how it interacts with SSI or SSDI. And that is a concern and really highlights the importance of working with benefits counselors or that kind of thing when you're determining your business structure and thinking about it. But those were some of the reasons that we heard from informants from VR about why they don't turn to self-employment. And while we can't address all of those, we can do some things in terms of really building up counselor training and resources for the VR participants to access, and we can help the VR agency really more clearly identify what their policies and procedures are. And so we have done that with our VR self-employment guide, which is what I'm going to show you today. So the guide originally was developed to increase counselor confidence in supporting self-employment. And it was originally developed as a workbook, and over time it's translated to an online format and really become a much more kind of all hands on board tool, as opposed to just training counselors. We figured, okay, that really doesn't make sense. Who's going to be starting the business is the VR participant, and we should be able to have resources that many people can access all at once. So we've made the guide flexible enough to accommodate a variety of VR agencies, policies, and procedures. We worked with VR agencies to understand those. The guide was informed by VR consumers, people who had gone through the program and started their own businesses, VR agency, self-employment task force, business development specialists. So a bunch of people contributed to this final product. And what it really is a common location where counselors, entrepreneurs, natural supports, CRPs or vendors, sometimes VR will contract with other people, and small business development staff can access and review the same resources. So it's just this one place where everyone can be looking at the same materials, the same examples, the same worksheets. And because of that, we feel like support and flow through the process can go a little bit easier because you're not hearing different messages about the process and what's required. So I am going to go to this website, which is www.vrselfemploymentguide, that's all one word, .org, and give you a little tour of our website and what you can find there and why it might be useful to you if you're interested in starting a business. Oh, and I do have contact information. I come back to this slide at the end if we need, but it includes my name and email, where I work, which is the Research and Training Center on Disability in Rural Communities called RTC Rural, and the Self-Employment Guide website. So I'm getting out of there and I'm going to the website. So I'm going to give first a little bit of an overview of what the website looks like, how you would navigate around it, and then just hit a few of the high points. Of course, there's a lot of content, 8 chapters worth of it, that we're not going to be able to hit on in 45 minutes or less. But to give you the high points, and then if you were someone who was interested in starting a self-employment business, you would have enough knowledge of the website to be able to actually utilize it, and it could be helpful to you. So first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the website layout. The home page is where you can land and access the chapters. There's an About Us section that just talks about the development and who is involved. There's some website navigation information. This could be particularly useful if you had a vision impairment and we're using a screen reader and we talk about best ways to interface with the information. I'm going to click on the materials section, and I want to highlight that This includes a lot of information that's downloadable and available to anyone using this resource. It includes print-only versions of every chapter's content. So if you want just straight words in a printable format that can be used easily by a screen reader, but also can be highlighted or, you know, used for reference going forward, you can find it here. And then each chapter has other resources that might be useful for you or someone else going through a self-employment process. And for easy access, we've included these worksheets and print-only versions throughout as they're covered in the chapter. So I just want to highlight that these are here. And for quick access, if you are, for instance, thinking, oh, I remember that worksheet was in some chapter, but I don't remember where it is, this is a good way to kind of go through quickly. We talked and interviewed business owners from Montana around us who had all started businesses through the Voc Rehab program. And they told us things about their businesses, how they used the business plan, how they did their marketing, those kinds of things. And throughout the website, there's opportunities to hear from them and see what they thought was important for these different sections. So I just want to highlight that they helped with developing the content, but also shaping and in their words, here's what I felt was interesting or important, as opposed to what you might read in a book. So that is the overview. You can also access the chapters from this. So you don't have to go to the home page to access the chapters. You can go right up here to the corner. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to go to the first chapter. So just a little bit more about how the content is organized. It's organized like a file folder. People may not even remember what those look like, but I do. And so reading across from left to right, there's different tabs that you can access different parts of the content, and they have little headings to kind of help you figure out where you are in that content. The first chapter is very much dedicated to starting a self-employment process within the vocational rehabilitation program. And I am not sure who is on the phone or on this call, but I wasn't going to emphasize the counselor aspect of this, thinking that people were maybe coming in more because they were just interested in entrepreneurship. But I just want to highlight that it covers things like how might the self-employment process unfold in VR? You know, you express interest, and here's some things that might expect. Here's some things that VR may or may not support. So for instance, there's different roles that describe how you would kind of go through it. You might have things that, and I'm sorry about the scrolling, but VR self-employment limits. There's sometimes each VR has their own limits on what they might support. So they might not support buying land or paying for labor or a business structure that is a corporation. Like, I don't know what each VR agency has for their parameters, but it talks about that's a conversation that you might need to have. That's enough said about this VR section, because I want to get to the stuff that is maybe more relevant to actually helping an entrepreneur start a business. I do want to stop for just a second. Does anyone have specific questions before I move on to actually some of the content? Okay, I am not seeing any, but if you see some typed in, Ariana, I'm not accessing that chat very Nope, I don't see any. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so the first part of starting a business is really figuring out your own readiness to start a business. People think about like, oh, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to start it because I want to do X, Y, and Z, or because I'm good at X, Y, and Z. And self-employment takes a lot of dedication and time and kind of passion. And it's sometimes a really good idea to do some self-evaluation of whether that's a good fit for me. So this first chapter is really focused on self-employment readiness. Am I ready to be a business owner? The first section really highlights some myths and realities of self-employment. So people think sometimes that it's really easy to start a business, and they're like, I love making winter mittens out of, like really beautiful woolen mittens. And they think, I can do that. I can run that as a business. And that's true. It's great to have something and be passionate about what you're producing. However, there's a lot of other things you have to do if you're owning a business. You've got to do bookkeeping, you got to do advertising, you have to do receipts, you might have to sit at art fairs, and there's all these other things that may not be what you're interested in doing or good at. And so really thinking about some of the things that are involved with self-employment that you may not be playing out fully in your mind. Another one that is really, I think, a lot of, you hear this, I get to work for myself, I'm my own boss, I can do whatever I want. Well, you do have some flexibility with self-employment, but you also, you are the one and only person that's going to be running that business. You have to be responsible for everything, not just the things that you like, particularly when you start. Or it's a good fit for me because I don't work well with others. Well, that also is an example of yeah, you may like to work alone and that might work out for you, but you also need to interface well with customers, with suppliers, with other professionals, that kind of thing. So really going through some of these myths and realities is a good check of, yeah, I'm on target for what I think self-employment is and why it would be good for me. So this next 3 tabs, values, business owner traits, and readiness self-assessment, are ways of further evaluating how your business might fit with your own personality traits, essentially. So the values worksheet, and I'm going to, I want to highlight that each of these 3 sections has a worksheet that accompanies it. And the worksheets are really designed for the consumer and the VR counselor to be able to talk through these things. But I think that they're valuable just for yourself thinking, oh, okay, how do, for instance, my values in terms of I'm a physical person, or I'm not a very social person, or I'm community minded, how do these values fit with the business that you're going to start? And so a great example is, let's say you're someone who says, I really prefer to be alone most of the time, and that's why I love making this product that I'm making and want to sell. Well, that product might be good for reinforcing that value, that work, the work that you're doing might build that value, but it also might be undermined by what you have to do for customer outreach. So maybe you are really good at making your product, but you're not going to be very good or feel very comfortable going out and talking about your product and beating the pavement and doing trade shows or that kind of thing. So it's really just doing some self-reflection about, what do I value in my life and how will my business build that or undermine it? And so there's a worksheet that is in here to help you. I'll try to find it, to help you set those things down and make an example. So I'm going to load this slowly website, or this sheet, and it just gives you an example of how you might go about filling it out. So Eleanor wrote different things about things she values. And then she went to the next page and she says her proposed business will be, I make, sell wreaths and other arrangements for holidays and different seasons. And then she talks about how that business will fit with what she values or compete with what she values, or if it will meet both. So it's just a self-reflection. And if you see a bunch of these X's being on competes with your values, that's an indication that maybe that's not the best fit for you going forward in kind of a long-term business. I'm going to close that. And I'm going to go to the top of the website, close your eyes. And then we look at the next kind of business evaluation that you see is, do you have these business owner traits? Are you, passionate, competitive, da, 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 da. There's all these, you can go online, there's a million self-assessments. And I found them to be really, that kind of the online self-assessments seemed pretty cutthroat to me. Like if you weren't a cutthroat person, you weren't going to make it. And I felt like it was better to just reflect if you have traits that maybe fit with some of these things. Like, can you demonstrate some of these skills in some of your past experiences? So the traits self-reflection worksheet reads a lot like a job application. So tell me from your past how you've been able to plan or follow through or problem solve. And once again, it's like, oh, I don't really feel like I have good experience in some of these areas. And maybe I don't really have the skill set yet for self-employment. And then finally, readiness self-assessment makes you start to really think more critically about why self-employment is a better choice than getting a job with an existing business. So most things that we do can be done either working for ourselves or working for someone else. And really thinking about why self-employment is a better choice is a consideration. How you'll pay your bills. So how will I get startup funding? You kind of start to have to think about some of these things. You need to think about business skills that you need for running your business. Like, do I have experience in managing day-to-day business things like bookkeeping or ordering or tracking inventory? Have I done any accounting? Do I know someone who can do accounting for me? Do I know how to advertise to customers? Do I have friends who might be willing to help me get started? So thinking about some of these skills or things needed to get going can not only help you identify what you have going in, but what you need to acquire. So I might need to brush up on some computer skills or take a class on, what do they call it? QuickBooks. That's what I was thinking about, how to do those things. Then also thinking about accommodations that might be needed. So if you have trouble communicating, how are you going to communicate with customers? So, really doing some of that troubleshooting ahead before you're really borrowing money and sinking things in is to really be planful and think if self-employment is going to be a good choice. Sometimes your own past will get in your way. Like, do I have debt or poor credit that will really make it more difficult for me to borrow money? And if that's the case, what do I need to do ahead of that business startup to kind of clean that up so that when I'm ready to start my business, I have some of these things in place? Okay, so that's really looking at consumer readiness. The next chapter looks at more down and dirty feasibility of the business. So I've evaluated myself. Now I need to evaluate what my business idea is. Is it a good idea? Is it an idea that customers want? And do I have the skills to do it? So you look at that, there's like three kind of prongs of that. Do you have the customers that are willing to buy your product? How are you going to manage it and operate it? And how are you going to finance it? And each of these is important for building a successful business. And I'm not going to go into these at length, but I do want to show a quick and dirty exercise that can help people evaluate, okay, this is a good business idea, it seems feasible, or this isn't a good business idea, it does not seem feasible. And so you essentially estimate, and it's called napkin math. Have you ever heard of napkin math? You know, you go to a restaurant and you're like, here's a business idea and we're going to write it down on a napkin and see if it pencils out. And then, you know, usually you've had a beer along with that and you're like, no, the next day it doesn't pencil out as well. But anyway, these estimates, you come up with 4 estimates. A really basic monthly living expenses. How much do you need to live just of your home, like rent, utilities, food, insurance? Then you think about what costs you need for your business. A lot of times when you're starting a smaller business, you're doing it out of your home, and these fixed costs for your business are maybe low. They aren't that high, but you need to cover both your monthly living expenses and your monthly fixed costs for your business. And there are 2 kinds of costs. I'm going to back up here. There's fixed costs. Fixed costs you pay no matter what. So let's say I sell 100 pairs of mittens, and I sell 0 pairs of mittens. I always pay my fixed costs. You don't get to not pay your fixed costs. Variable costs, on the other hand, are costs that go into producing the mittens. So your variable costs might be your wool yarn, or, you know, the cost to drive to the art fair once you've made those things. Those are things that they change with how much you're selling, where fixed costs you pay no matter what. So those are the 2 costs that you have to come up with. You also need to do some quick estimates. So your fixed costs, your living expenses. You have to think about what it costs to buy something similar. So going back to the mittens thing, I think to myself, okay, I have seen mittens at art fairs for $30. So that's kind of what I expect. I don't know this for sure. I haven't done this is really just quick math. I'm not sure how much it's going to be. I just think I'm estimating based on what I've seen. This is what I could charge. And then you think about, okay, how much does it cost to make that pair of mittens? Well, it might cost, you know, an hour of my time and $5 worth of unit, or $5 worth of yarn. So maybe depending on if you're paying yourself $15 or $20 an hour or something, that is what it costs to make that similar product. And by using those 2 calculations, you can figure out how many things you would need to sell every month. And that's a great indicator to you whether or not that's a good business or feasible. So I'm going to show you this example in a well, I'm going to show you the cost evaluation exercise worksheet that will help you kind of come up with these. So let's say I decide, or I don't decide. I know that my rent is $500. I pay about $150 in utilities across the year, so that's $650. I spend about $300 on food, $950, and I spend $100 on insurance. So I'm going, okay, that's my monthly personal living expenses. Now, my fixed costs for my business, I'm going to say, are really low. I'm going to do it out of my house. I have to do a little bit, like get a special phone line for it and do a little bit of advertising every month. So I'm going to just say 100 there. So those two costs are my monthly expenses. And these I'm probably aiming really low. Should be 7% higher as of, 2022. But I'm just trying to show an example. And let's say I think that I can get $40 per unit for what I'm selling, and it costs me between my labor and materials $20. So what that says is for every unit that I sell, I'm going to make $20. And that $20 is meant to overcome or pay for my total monthly expenses. And using those two values, that means that I would need to sell approximately 60 pairs of mittens a month. And this can be any, like, you either know you can do that or you don't think you can. It depends on, oh yeah, I have a friend, I talked to a friend who works at the craft fair, and they easily sell 100 pairs of mittens in 1 month or one day at the craft fair. And then you go, okay, I could probably sell that per month. Or there might be something really different, like, oh, they only sell 10 pairs per craft fair, and that really isn't enough. I don't think I could pull or cover my costs to make that. So this is a good way to just essentially decide right off the bat whether or not that's feasible. And the website I want to highlight includes real exercises that are probably more fleshed out than what I did here, but give some examples of how you might think about that. So once you decide, like, yeah, I actually, based on my napkin math, I think it's a go, I want to keep going, then there are 3 worksheets that, if you are starting a very simple business plan, might suffice to, or starting a very simple business, they might suffice or cover as a business planning document. And they are the About You worksheet, the About Your Business worksheet, and Startup Cost worksheet. So the About You worksheet, and I do want to highlight too that there's examples of every single one of these filled out, so people can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. But the About You worksheet is kind of, why do you want to be self-employed? How did you come up with your business idea? And do you have experience? Do you have interest? Can you talk about or address anything about consumers or customers wanting or needing the product? Do you have any experience? Like, what experience or training has prepared you to run this business? It's not, you don't have to know how to do everything, but the more experience you have, the better you are starting out. And then, have you ever done a business in the past? How did that go? Did it stay open? Did it close? Why was it successful? Those kinds of things. What would you do different? Some self-reflection about that. Disability accommodations that you need to think about. Skills and knowledge you need to kind of get in line to complete. How you'll do your bookkeeping, how you'll reach out, how you'll do all the different things in a 40-hour week or more to make your business run. So that's kind of the About You. The About Your Business worksheet really focus more in on, okay, what's the business name? What are you actually going to be doing? Describe that in detail. How are you going to run the business in the day-to-day, on the day-to-day basis? So you need to think about all these things. And I want to highlight that each one of these is covered in almost a full chapter. So how you'll do your day-to-day operations, you can talk kind of surfacely about how you do all these things, but if you really want more additional in-depth information, it's covered in later chapters about developing kind of all of the things that might need to be included. Same for business structure. So it shows where you can find these things. Who are your potential customers? Where do they live? What do they do? Why would they want your business? What makes it a good business? How are you going to market? And then learning about other businesses and what they do well and how you're different than them. And so how are you going to draw on the things that they do well, and how are you going to differentiate, third time's a charm, differentiate yourself from what they're doing. So that is kind of the things that you cover in that plan. You also talk about where your business is going to be located. Business locations can, you know, location is a really important thing. Is it in a safe area? Are you operating it out of your home, and what will your neighbors think? Are they going to be mad if people are driving up all the time or coming in? Or so it's really important to think about all those attributes of how you're going to run your business, how you're going to advertise, and think about your customers, zoning laws and restrictions and licensing. These are other things that you need to think about. And some businesses are pretty easy in that department. Some are very complicated, and things like the operations plan really highlight, like, have you thought about insurances? Have you thought about sales taxes? Have you thought about online, you know, cross interstate kinds of sales that you need to consider, as well as feasibility. So these kind of worksheets, you kind of go through and answer questions, and when you have blanks or I don't know the answer to that, you can talk to others for advice. You can go to the Small Business Development Center, or the counselor might be able to direct you to someone else. But it's important to have a lot of these questions flushed out. And for a full business plan, they'll be required. For this, it's kind of just to start getting the entrepreneur thinking about it. So this last part of the feasibility, which is a part that I'm kind of excited about because it took a lot of work. And so I hope people use it and think about it. But every business has a huge amount of startup costs that you need to think about just to get started. So you need to, you know, maybe get your inventory or equipment. You need to get your space of your business lined out. You need to think about advertising just to get started. Like, I need signage at the business, or I need cards made to pass out, that sort of thing. Maybe there's licenses and things that you need to have in place before you open a business, and other expenses. And we spent some time. It can be hard to think about all these costs, calculate all the costs, and keep track of them. So I'm not going to show you the blank worksheet, but I'm going to show you the example worksheet of daisies. And I just want to show you how this startup costs worksheet works for people. So each page includes just a category. So materials and supplies is page 2, inventory is page 3, so forth. And as you flow through these, you can quickly add items and it recalculates for you. So let's say I am looking at materials and supplies, and for startup costs, Daisy's, she wanted some craft paper rolls, ribbon, flower sleeves. And she goes, oh, shoot, I need vases too. And so she can type in vases, and she can get her vases from Michael's. Do you guys have Michael's out there? Probably not. And I feel like, at least for starting, I want to have 10 of those, and they're $2. it will automatically calculate that 20 for you. So it's all you need to know is how many you need and how much it costs. Not hard when it's $2, but maybe harder when it's, you know, $16.39 a piece. And then it totals here. And for each of these sheets at the very end, you have a, you have a total sheet that gives you kind of each section a cost and a total here. So at some point, that startup cost, at a minimum, you need to be able to cover all your startup costs. So that kind of gives you a ballpark of, oh, I need to borrow $5,000, or I need to have $5,000 in savings to at least cover what I need to get the business, the doors open, essentially. The other thing that you can do in this sort of thing is go, oh, okay, that's more than I want to spend. Where might I be able to lower some costs? So if, for instance, in, let's say the cart, she was going to build a cart, will be built. She's like, oh, okay, I'm going to shop around and see if I can get one for a little less, or maybe I can get my cousin to help me build one. And now the only thing that I need is just the lumber to go into it. So getting to that bottom line and then really thinking critically about where you can maybe be a little more frugal in what you're deciding. I don't need an Apple computer. I'm going to get a Vino, or I don't even know what the lower end ones are. But so that is something that is also available. Okay, so I've gotten through the first 3 chapters, and I just want to highlight that chapters 4, the business plan, 5, the marketing plan, 6, the operations plan, and 7, the financial plan, are the sections that you really would go through to fill out a full business plan. And one thing that I want to highlight there is we have included a sample business plan that people can follow along with, but also a business plan outline that essentially provides you and follows along with the website. I'm going to show you this in a minute. It's opening in Word. And in this particular case, I did it in a Word document so that you can modify it, take out stuff, but you have all your headings and you have your prompts about what each section is. So the executive summary is covered in chapter 4. It includes a business description, owner qualifications, customers, financials. Business description, it includes a company description. What is that? It includes a business background. What is that? And although the website really goes into a lot of background about why you do this or how you get this information, this is where you put in your answers to develop a business plan. I'm going to talk 3 more minutes. I said I would be done by 2:45, but I'm going to take 3 more minutes. I just want to highlight that probably the chapter that would be the most valuable, I think, for people who are starting a business and haven't done a lot of kind of forecasting and that sort of thing, is the financial planning exercises. We've included really kind of step-by-step directions to do all these different things, like a break-even analysis or a sales forecast or a cash flow statement. And they're included in Excel and Google Forms. So each of these different kinds of exercises to really help a person understand how you go about conducting these things and how they will help your business, it will help you understand how your business is doing relative to what you've forecasted or estimated. So I'm going to quickly go to, for instance, a sales forecast, which is, I'm not going to go through all the different ways you can do it, but I'm going to look at a sales breakdown. So a sales breakdown can include things like, okay, I'm going to do all these different services. Let's say it's lawn mowing, snow removal, raking, grounds cleanup, fertilizing. Those things aren't going to all happen at once. They're going to happen at different times across the year. They're going to happen, you're going to have different customers as your customer base grows or gets smaller. And so it's really important to be able to figure out accurately how much money you'll be bringing in across the year based on when you're going to be doing these jobs, how often you do them. So for instance, snow removal, there's not going to be a lot of snow removal in July if you live in the US. You would do a lot more lawn mowing in the spring and fall if you live in Montana, not so much in the summer because it's so dang hot. But it's, so you have to like account for all those variations across the year. And that we've included a website or a sheet, like that sales forecast sheet, that helps you do that for all those different activities. So I just want to highlight it's there. I'm almost scared to show it to you, but I'm gonna show it to you and then I'll stop talking. So in this case, we have directions of how a person would fill it out. And then we have directions of how, if it's the example, how that person filled it out. But as you see, going across here, I'm going to make this just a little bigger. The price doesn't change across the year unless you're increasing it. But Carl has estimated that his customer base will increase for lawn mowing over the summer. So it went from 10 customers to 13 to 16. And then this is the number of lawn mows he would do in each month. So it helps him go, okay, in March, talking to other grounds people, I know that I would do maybe 2 in March, 4 lawn mows in April, May, and June, and July, and then it gets hot, so I'm going to do less. And you take all this information, the cost per lawn mow, the number of customers you have, and the number of times you're doing it for a month to come up with totals. And if you have different services, that money may be coming in at different times. And by doing kind of estimations along these lines, then you can really start to figure out, okay, I'm getting started. I'll only make $750 the first month, but I'll get more as I get more customers, and I'm doing more lawn mows in January, but February is kind of a shoulder month, so I may not be making as much. And this can just help you begin to see how your sales will change, grow, ebb and flow across the year. So that's an example of some of the website or worksheets that are there. So I'm going to stop there, but I appreciate people bearing with this, and I hope it was semi-useful. We'll see. So I'm happy to answer any questions or.
Terry, hi, can you hear me?
This is Catherine. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. What about in the book? Do they have like resources of, loans and stuff like that?
There is a resource section. I'm going to go back to my share really quickly. It's here.
Okay.
Resources, and there are just some examples of different kind of places that people could go to learn more. And then there's funding resources.
Right.
That there's not like, people aren't dying to give you money, so.
I know. unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, VR is a good place to get some of these
Yeah.
startup funds, honestly. But then we've broken it out by veterans and then some tribal and minority kinds of things too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions before we call it a day?
Yes, one second. How can we, are we able to access that online, Catherine? It was very good. I thought it was very explainable, explained a lot of things in detail and
Yep.
clarified stuff.
Yep. The website name is vrselfemploymentguide.org.
Self-employment guide.
Yeah, I added the link to the chat. So the link is there available.
Okay, thank you.
Just copy.
Thank you.
I guess we don't have any more questions.
All right. Okay. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day and hope everyone has a nice 3-day weekend if they get it. So.
As well, you as well, Catherine. Thank you. It was wonderful.
Yes, thank you so much. We
Yeah, I
really
really
appreciate you
appreciate
taking the
that.
time to do this.
Sure.
Quite well. I liked it very much. I think that's,
Okay.
I think, you know, self-employment is a way that is a trend now that's going towards that way. People want to be their own employer, own boss.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. All right, I will end the chat now.